Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 7 of MC305. This video will go over part 2 of chapter 12, which is media relations. So what exactly is media relations? Well, media relations is actually a subset, a smaller part of the larger, more general public relations. Typically, a public relations professional will conduct media relations as part of their jobs. However, for larger organizations, you may be solely responsible for media relations and then have other people that are public relations spokespeople. The media relations side of things is really about the ability to work with media partners, both owned and outside media, the ability to get your organization on the news, whether that's through paid content like advertising or through earned media like being shown on the local newscast, or the ability to control the narrative about your organization in news and other multimedia formats. Now, there are 3 main types of media in media relations. The first is paid media. This is one that is controlled. Controlled media is any type of media that you have the ability to kind of maintain the strategic communication, the brand, voice, style, appearance of your message. So paid media allows you to do that because it's an advertisement or a sponsored placement that you're paying for a specific time for. So you have a lot of control with paid media. You're deciding where your ads are going to go. The good thing about paid media is that it helps you expand your reach to a broader audience, and you do have a lot of control over appearance, style, and timing. However, the drawback is that the advertising world is very saturated. Every organization is trying to sell something to its audience, and audiences are becoming fed up with how prevalent advertising is. And so they tend to ignore a lot of advertising. So it can be very difficult to capture the audience's attention through advertising means. There's also a loss of credibility with advertising because someone knows that you're paying to try to persuade them. And a lot of times, paid media takes a large budget to make a big impact. Now, specific jobs that deal solely with paid media are media buyers who would work with various media outlets to purchase advertising slots, and traffic managers who look and make sure that all of your advertisements have been run as the agreement stated. Earned media is the second type of media within media relations. This is an uncontrolled media type. So controlled is when you have the ability to shape the voice and the timing of your message. Uncontrolled media, you're really giving the power to someone else, typically another journalist, to decide when they're going to communicate, if at all, about your organization. And they're going to do it in their own voice as opposed to your strategic communication voice. Now, news or publicity that is generated for an organization at no cost is the definition of earned media. Its tools are news releases, publicity campaigns, and story pitches. And we'll be writing story pitches for our assignment this week. It's when your media shows up on an external media organization publication like print, digital, broadcast, or even a news page's social media account. You can easily extend your messages to owned or paid publishing, so you can really mix all 3 of these with one message. But being able to be placed on a news organization's media pages increases your credibility as an organization. It's free, and you'll have a larger reach than what your own channels allow. The drawback is that it's uncontrolled. You can't determine what the media is going to say about you. So the message could even be potentially negative and hurt your organization. So it's a slight risk, but the gains usually outweigh the risk. The other drawback is that it's hard to get through those gatekeepers, those people who get to decide what goes on the news and what doesn't. So it's important for media relations people and press relations people who hold those jobs to have good relationships with journalists and editors so that they can break through the gates of the news outlets. So the specific jobs here are media relations, sometimes called press relations, or a spokesperson. Now, the third type of media relations media is owned media. This is another form of controlled media because you're the one creating it, and you have even more control over it in this sense because it's going on your client or your employer's platforms. So if I'm the American Heart Association and I post on the American Heart Association's Facebook page, that's owned media because it's my own organization. There are tons of different forms of owned media: newsletters, websites, blogs, your own social media platforms, brochures, annual reports, catalogs, pretty much anything that you can house within your own organization is considered owned media. You do have complete control over the content and the brand voice, which is definitely a positive. And a lot of times, especially with internal communications, you already have buy-in from your audience members because they've already followed you or they work for you or they're already buying your product. And so it's about getting those deeper associations with your brand or product. The drawback is that you have a limited audience reach, so you're not able to reach people who are not familiar with your organization already. And sometimes it can come across as inauthentic because they know that you're the one writing it. So it lacks some of the credibility of free media. Internal communications, community relations, stakeholder relations, and a social media director would all focus primarily on owned media content. Now, a media relations professional will spend a large amount of time, like the majority of their job is media relations, and you're needing all three types. So even if you're an internal communications person who would mainly focus on owned media, you're still going to need to use media relations in order to repost some of the interviews that go on in news on your own pages. So it's kind of an intertwined relationship. And unless you're working for a very large organization, it's likely that one person will do all three of those types of media. So the keys to media relations are to know the gatekeepers, start and maintain relationships with journalists as soon as you begin your position, take them out to lunch, take them out to coffee, get to know them as real people so that when they need something, they'll reach out to you. And when you need something, they'll be more willing to work with you. It's that symbiotic relationship there. You need to be able to create content for your own platforms in multimedia formats. So all the different types of things that I just talked about, from websites to brochures to vlogs, you should be able to produce all of those things. It's why we are teaching you convergent media strategies here at Montevallo, because you need to know how to do it all as a media relations professional. You also need to create content for journalists. A lot of times when you write a press release or even a pitch to a media organization, they're going to use what you send them word for word if it is professional enough. This allows you to maintain your brand voice, for you to control the message to a degree, and it makes it better for your organization. So the better you can write in a journalistic format, the better off you'll be for media relations. Again, this is why even though I teach media relations, I also teach you journalism so that you can work in this symbiotic relationship. A media relations professional also needs to train their spokespeople. You're usually not the one representing your organization. For instance, if a journalist called and asked for an interview on latest developments in heart surgery, I'm not going to be the one that they interview as the media relations expert because I don't have the expertise. Instead, I would be finding a heart researcher or a heart doctor to be the spokesperson for the American Heart Association. But it's my job as media relations to make sure that person is ready for that interview. You also need to be familiar with budgeting and organizational tactics, especially when dealing with paid media. You need to know what advertising works. And then you need to be familiar with analytics so you know how to evaluate the success of your paid, free, and owned media campaigns. A lot of people ask, given the distrust in traditional media outlets, is media relations, and probably more specifically earned media, still relevant? Well, earned media is the most effective source of information in impacting consumers along all stages of the purchase process, according to Nielsen. This is that convergence funnel model that we talked about earlier, and how to get someone to do what you want them to do. So earned media is the most effective according to this organization. And PR research shows that media pitches that complement existing campaign activities actually generate 10 to 50 times more conversions than your standard paid advertisement. So if you are able to do earned media really well, then you will be very effective for your overall public relations campaigns. And although trust in traditional media is declining, traditional media advertising, as well as traditional media as an earned media, are still more effective than online advertisements. So even though online ads are cheap, people don't trust them very much. So earned media is still the best way to do media relations. There are many tools that you'll use for media relations, everything from a pitch to a news organization, a news release, which tells them about your event or organization, whatever newsworthy thing you're wanting them to cover, your media kit, which will provide a lot of detail about what the journalist needs to know, social media post, whether that's your owned channels or whether you're writing social media posts for others to use, like an advertisement, website design, content production, search engine optimization and keywords, brochures, newsletters, annual reports, presentations, speeches. You have to be familiar with all these tools of the trade for media relations. You may be asking yourself, how on earth could I be good at all of these things? Well, the good news is they all have the same underlying foundation: storytelling, news values, persuasion, and the ropes process. If you understand these foundational skills, it's just about applying them to whatever format that you're writing for media relations. So that's why we have focused so hard on these 4 values and skills in the beginning of the semester, so that now we can begin to show you how to do these tools of media relations and advertising. So in using rope for media relations, one of the key things in your programming side is going to be media tools. And these include a pitch, a media release, a media alert, and a media kit. I think your textbook can get a little confusing about these terms, so I'm going to describe them in further detail for you. A media pitch is when you're trying to persuade a journalist to cover some aspect of your organization, whether that's an event you're holding, whether you want a spokesperson to be present as an expert, whether you've won an award, you know, whatever is going on in your organization that you want the news to cover, you need to pitch it to the journalist first. And it's all about persuasion. A media release is a description of whatever it is you want the news to cover, with enough information for them to be able to write the story off of. A media alert is when you have an event and it's really just an invitation to come to that event. So those are way more rare to use than a media release. And then a media kit is given to the journalists later, once they've agreed to do the interview or whether they're preparing for the interview, so that they have a whole host of resources to write the story based on. Now, for this class, we're going to be focusing on the media pitch, but all of these are key skills you'll need to know. Now, a pitch is reaching out to a media partner to offer a news story. The aim is to create interest in the story and gauge the potential for coverage. How do you do that? You persuade them that your program, client, or product is relevant, meaning it matters to the news organization and the communities that they cover. It's newsworthy, meaning you're going back to those key news values that we talked about earlier in the semester. You're showing them why it matters right now. It's timely. You're providing expert opinions or an interesting angle on something. and you're writing in a way that is structured for news. So if you're pitching to a television station, for instance, you're going to tell them how visual your story is so that they are persuaded that it's right for their type of organization. Now, some key things to keep in mind with a pitch is make sure you're flipping the pitch. You shouldn't be thinking like a media relations professional. You should be thinking as if you were the journalist. What does the journalist want? How can you help the journalist with whatever you're pitching? So pitch from the angle as if you were the journalist and you were telling yourself what you need and want for a story. You're going to want to find areas that have news holes or that have low content so you can provide yours as a good thing for them to cover. Remember, advertorials don't work with traditional media. This is like someone coming to you and saying, hey, I have this cool new product I want you to buy. Will you put it on the news for me? No, that's not news. It's not newsworthy. Some trade media might do it, but even those advertorials are not persuasive. They're not effective. So don't do it. Instead, find out what makes your product or whatever you're pitching newsworthy. And you should provide viewpoints or expert information that people need. So if a journalist is contacting you and saying, hey, we need someone to speak to this, find someone to speak to that so your organization can be the expert source. You should always write the whole journalism story yourself as a media relations professional and see what aspects of the story you're missing. If you're missing it, you can find those holes of information or resources that a journalist might need before they ask for it, and that should help you plan. And you need to plan all PR events and content to be media friendly, meaning you need to have spokespeople readily available. You need to have visuals. You need to make sure that there are areas where people can record in quiet, silent areas, things like that. And most important, never forget that you're telling a story. Storytelling is such a key skill because it makes a boring, mundane event come to life. So find the people that make the story matter and tell their story by making it personal. Pitches should be short and direct. They need to emphasize the newsworthiness or hook. They have to have the contact information of the media relations professional. And try to be aware of a media preference. So if you know that a news organization meets at a certain time or needs, 5 links, provide whatever they need. Just be accommodating. Make sure your tone is enthusiastic and positive. You should always sound very passionate about what you do because you're the authority. You know your program. Don't make anything up, but you should always act like you are the expert on whatever your organization does. But if you don't know something, be honest and say, hey, I don't know that right now, but let me follow up with you in 5 or 10 minutes, and then go research and find out whatever they're asking that you don't know. And you should always try to follow up conversations with another form of contact. Typically, I will first email a journalist and then call them maybe a few hours later to ensure that they got it and to make sure that they don't need anything from me. It's also harder to turn someone down by phone than it is through email. So there are many different types of pitches. Traditional, which would involve like pitching through email, a fax. Yes, I know we still have fax machines, or calling someone directly. But you can also pitch to a journalist through social media. That's becoming much more common, and including media contact spaces off of your owned media content. So for instance, if I were writing a blog about something, at the very end, I could say, if you're a media outlet that's interested in learning more about this, contact Danielle Devers at, and then list my email address, so that a journalist who is reading my owned media content might be interested in doing earned media content based off that content. So here are some examples of pitches. Hi, Jessica. I just read your story on the health benefits of keto diet. I've got a good one for you. A new survey of 2,000 keto followers found 87% of keto dieters report that they cheat on the diet. Happy to provide more context and finding. Thanks, Brian. So here are some things to note about this. Brian and Jessica are obviously already know each other. That's one key. So you should always know the journalist that you're pitching to. If not, make an introduction of yourself and try to maintain that relationship a little bit better before you pitch them next time. Always reference something that that journalist has done. Show them that you know who they are and that you read what they do. Try to link your story to previous content. And finally, provide some fact, data, newsworthy information that would make them interested. Now, this does not provide a call to action. I think Brian should have said, you know, let's find a time to meet so I can provide you additional facts about my research or something like that. Put the ball in the journalist's court so that they have to contact you. This is a bad pitch. Calling the journalist by the wrong name, definitely a bad start. I would probably put that in my delete box immediately if that happened. This person trying to do like a creative pitch by talking about small business owners tend to be self-taught on many aspects of marketing and social media. But if I'm reading this as a journalist, I'm like, wait, you didn't introduce yourself. I don't know who I'm talking to. What are you wanting? Like, what is this news? So I'm lost immediately. You need to be clear about what is your information and what information you're taking from somewhere else, because again, you're the expert. And if it's not your information, I don't really want to talk to you. Just dropping a news release without explaining what's going on can be very confusing. And then this is overall too long and too boring. Here's a good pitch. The reporter's name is Pete. Getting the right name is really important. It's all about relationships, right? Make sure you are clear. If you are with an organization, list that name right away so that the journalist will pay attention, especially if it's a large name. The meat of your pitch, the main hook, needs to be in bold and underlined. So if I'm reading fast, I immediately know what you want. You should try to use data and provide, what you're really wanting to be the newsworthy aspect. It's good to point out how previous coverage links to whatever story you're pitching and show that you actually read their stuff, or at least be able to fake it. So again, this is all part of having a good pitch. Now, here are some other instances. These are the main things I'm going to be looking for when I'm grading your pitch. I want you to email a real person, not some newsroom, not some junk folder, a real journalist. Have a persuasive or clickable subject line in the email. Make sure the email is individualized, that you're making it timely, that you're showing what the newsworthiness is, that your pitch overall is short, and you're ending with a call to action and your contact information. So those are all things that need to be in your pitch. So now that you've watched this video, make sure you check out our guest speaker, Ainsley Allison with the City of Hoover. And then do your discussion post on media relations. You'll be writing a media pitch for your writing assignment, and then review for your AP exam on Thursday.